What does it take to escape captivity when every breath could mean discovery? These are the films that made real prisoners of war nod in silence. Each one captures fear, hope, and ingenuity without the safety of Hollywood illusion. They are tales carved in dirt wire and blood. From tunnels to coded messages, these 15 stories honor those who lived the nightmare and dared to flee it. Number 15. The Wooden Horse, 1950. The Wooden Horse was not a blockbuster. It was something purer, a quiet testament to patience and courage. Based on a true escape from Stalag Luft III, the same camp later immortalized by The Great Escape, it follows British airmen who use a wooden vaulting horse to disguise the digging of an escape tunnel. Every day they carry it to the yard pretending to exercise while others dig beneath it. The film was celebrated for its realism and restraint. There were no explosions, no melodrama, just the steady rhythm of routine and risk. Real ex-POWs who had known the camps praised its authenticity. They said it captured the suffocating fear of being watched every second, the small victories, the sound of boots on gravel that could end everything. Behind the scenes, the production mirrored the escape itself. Sets were built using authentic camp blueprints. The actors lived under military discipline to replicate the tension. Some scenes were filmed so quietly that crew members joked they felt imprisoned themselves. Critics at the time called it too slow, but veterans disagreed. They said that slowness was the truth. Escape was not about running. It was about waiting. Today, The Wooden Horse stands as a film of quiet defiance, showing that victory sometimes begins with patience, not gunfire. Number 14. The Great Escape, 1963. It was not just a movie. It was an anthem of defiance. The Great Escape brought together a dream cast led by Steve McQueen, Richard Attenborough, and James Garner to dramatize the daring mass breakout from Stalag Luft III. The film became iconic for McQueen's motorcycle chase across barbed wire, but the real heroes had no Hollywood ending. Audiences cheered its energy, but survivors felt its pain. They saw their friends in every captured face. The film condensed a vast operation into a spectacle, but the spirit remained intact. It reminded the world that war was not only fought on battlefields, but behind fences. Production itself was a battle. Filmed in Bavaria, it faced German officials uneasy about revisiting that chapter. McQueen clashed with the director over his character's pride in stunt scenes. Real war veterans advised the crew to avoid glamorizing the suffering. When released, governments downplayed it, fearing it might reignite old wounds. Yet soldiers everywhere embraced it. The real escape had ended in tragedy. 50 were executed on Hitler's orders. The movie turned that loss into eternal resistance. Survivors said it made them feel seen. The legacy endures in every prisoner who dreams of freedom and every viewer who hears the echo of a motorcycle on empty fields. Number 13. Stalag 17, 1953. Billy Wilder's Stalag 17 was not meant to flatter anyone. It was cynical, funny, and painfully real. Set in a German POW camp, it followed American airmen who suspect one of their own of being a spy. Beneath its dark humor lay a world of suspicion and despair that veterans recognized instantly. William Holden's performance as the sharp-tongued Sefton won him an Oscar, but he nearly refused the role, fearing it was too bleak. The film broke from patriotic tradition. It did not show noble heroes. It showed tired men gambling, scheming, and losing hope. For many survivors, that was the truth they remembered. During production, Wilder faced backlash. Some accused him of mocking soldiers, others praised him for honesty. Wilder himself had fled Nazi Germany and knew the price of captivity. He filled the film with real details from POW accounts, the cold barracks, the barter economy, the endless boredom. Critics were divided. Some wanted heroism. Others saw courage and laughter. The U.S. military was cautious about endorsing it, worried that the moral ambiguity might offend families of veterans. But in the decades since, historians and survivors have called it one of the most truthful portrayals of prison camp life ever filmed. It ends not with fireworks, but with weary triumph, a single escape into the fog. Wilder's message was clear. Freedom is not only about breaking fences, it is about keeping your mind alive when the world has turned to wire. Number 12. King Rat, 1965. King Rat was not a patriotic war movie. It was a study in survival. Adapted from James Clavell's novel and based on his own experiences as a prisoner in Changi Prison Camp, Singapore, it stripped away all illusions of heroism. The story follows Corporal King, an American who thrives inside the camp by bartering, manipulating, and outsmarting both captors and fellow prisoners. For many survivors, it was unsettlingly accurate. They said it captured the moral decay of captivity. In Changi, it was not about medals or missions. It was about the next meal, the next breath. George Siegel's performance as King gave the film its pulse, a mix of charm and ruthlessness that felt painfully real to those who had lived it. Behind the scenes, the movie faced moral hesitation. Columbia Pictures worried that showing prisoners as corrupt and self-serving would alienate audiences used to noble depictions of war. Director Brian Forbes, however, refused to soften it. He said war crushes morality before it kills the body. The set was built using authentic blueprints of Changi with real former POWs advising on detail. Upon release, critics were divided. Some saw it as nihilistic, others as revolutionary. Survivors recognized it instantly. They said it told the truth no one wanted to hear, that sometimes the worst cages were made by hunger, not iron. King Rat remains one of the most psychologically honest POW films ever made, exposing the thin line between decency and desperation. Number 11. The Bridge on the River Kwai, 1957. It was grand, colorful, and unforgettable. The Bridge on the River Kwai turned real suffering into cinematic legend. Directed by David Lean, it followed British POWs in Burma forced to build a railway bridge for the Japanese. Alec Guinness played Colonel Nicholson, a man so obsessed with discipline and pride that he unknowingly aids the enemy. When it premiered, it was hailed as a masterpiece. It won 7 Oscars and became an instant classic. But survivors of the Burma Railway had mixed feelings. They admired its craftsmanship but despised its romanticism. Many said no officer would have acted as Nicholson did, and that the film softened the sheer brutality of the camp. Behind the camera, Lean battled chaos. The production in Ceylon was plagued by heat exhaustion and illness. Guinness clashed with Lean over Nicholson's motivations. The famous bridge explosion was real, built over a real river and blown up with a single take. Yet the real controversy came later. Japanese veterans protested its portrayal of guards. British survivors claimed it erased their torment. Still, the film forced the world to remember. The haunting whistled march became a symbol of defiance, but also irony. For behind its music lay thousands of graves. Survivors later said it captured one truth perfectly: the madness that grows when duty replaces humanity. Number 10. Escape from Sobibor, 1987. Escape from Sobibor was a television movie, yet it shook audiences worldwide. Based entirely on true events, it chronicled the revolt at the Sobibor extermination camp, where Jewish prisoners planned and executed a mass breakout in 1943. It was one of the few successful uprisings in the Holocaust. The film avoided spectacle. It focused on fear, precision, and moral courage. Rutger Hauer played Alexander Pechersky, the Soviet POW who led the revolt. Survivors praised Hauer for portraying a man broken yet unyielding. The film's realism came from its consultants, actual survivors of Sobibor, who guided every scene, ensuring no gesture was exaggerated. During filming, the atmosphere was heavy. Crew members described an eerie silence on set, especially when scenes were shot in reconstructed gas chambers. Many broke down after takes. Director Jack Gold refused to dramatize death for shock value, instead showing it as quiet, routine horror. When it aired, it reached millions but faced censorship in Eastern Europe. Some governments feared it would spark painful debates about complicity and rebellion. Yet, for Holocaust survivors, it was sacred testimony. They said it captured the impossible choice between death and dignity. Its legacy lives in classrooms and memorials. Historians call it one of the most faithful reconstructions of camp life and uprising. For those who escaped, real captivity. Escape from Sobibor showed that even in hell, resistance was still possible. Number 9. The Colditz Story, 1955. The Colditz story remains one of the purest examples of British restraint under pressure. It was not filled with explosions or sweeping love stories. It was a film about disciplined courage and ingenuity told through clenched jaws and quiet defiance. Based on the true experiences of Allied prisoners held in Colditz Castle, the infamous German fortress deemed escape-proof, it told how the impossible was attempted again and again. The story followed Major Pat Reed, played by John Mills, as he organized escape attempts in a labyrinthine castle of stone walls and endless watchtowers. The film blended suspense with subtle humor, showing that the POWs found their sanity in mocking their captors and in dreaming of freedom. It was not about violence. It was about patience, intellect, and invisible wars fought with chalk string and faith. Production was as demanding as the story it portrayed. Director Guy Hamilton, who had himself been a naval officer during the war, demanded accuracy. Real Colditz survivors served as advisors, correcting dialogue and set design. Many moments in the film came directly from documented events, including a daring attempt using homemade uniforms and forged papers. Critics praised its dignity, but some veterans found it too neat, too sanitized. They said Colditz had been far crueler, yet others defended it, saying the film captured the soul of resistance, not the blood. When it released, the British public embraced it as a reminder that intellect could defeat tyranny. Decades later, the Colditz story inspired countless television adaptations, documentaries, and even a museum exhibit. Survivors continued to attend screenings, saying it brought back the smell of damp stone and fear. Its legacy endures as proof that even the thickest walls cannot contain a determined mind. Number 8. Hart's War, 2002. Hart's War arrived at the turn of a new century when war movies had become darker, more introspective. Starring Bruce Willis and Colin Farrell, it told the story of an American POW camp in Germany near the end of World War II. When an African-American airman is accused of murder, Lieutenant Hart defends him in a camp courtroom as the prisoners face their own moral collapse. Though fictional, the film's emotional truth resonated with veterans and historians alike. It captured the daily humiliations of captivity, the hunger for fairness, and the quiet battles of conscience. Hart's War was about power within the powerless, about who chooses justice when survival is the easier path. Behind the scenes, the film faced storms. MGM worried that its heavy themes of race and honor would alienate mainstream audiences looking for heroism. The cast endured freezing conditions in Prague, where the camp was reconstructed using archival footage as reference. Bruce Willis clashed with director Gregory Hoblit over tone. He wanted action. Hoblit wanted introspection. The compromise gave the movie its unique blend of tension and tragedy. Critics were divided. Some dismissed it as slow, others hailed it as deeply human. Yet veterans recognized something special. They said the film showed the invisible prison, the one made of guilt and loyalty. Survivors of European camps remarked that it captured the subtle cruelty of guards and the exhaustion of endless waiting. Hart's War never became a blockbuster, but among real POW survivors it earned rare respect. Its legacy lies in its moral question, not its battles. When the walls close in, who still chooses truth? Number 7. The One That Got Away, 1957. Few escape films dared to tell the story from the enemy's side. The One That Got Away did exactly that. It followed the real-life tale of Franz von Vera, a German Luftwaffe pilot who became the only Axis prisoner of war to escape from British captivity and return to Germany. Starring Hardy Kruger himself, a former German soldier, the film portrayed an adversary not as villain, but as man driven by sheer survival instinct. It shocked audiences on release. British critics admired its craftsmanship but were uneasy about sympathizing with a Nazi officer. Yet survivors of captivity, whether Allied or German, understood. They said it was not a political story, but a human one. The will to escape transcended sides. Production faced controversy from the start. The British government hesitated to approve filming on military sites, fearing it might glorify the enemy. Director Roy Ward Baker fought for the story's honesty, arguing that portraying humanity on both sides would not weaken the Allies' legacy, it would strengthen it. During shooting, Kruger insisted on performing dangerous stunts himself, including freezing water scenes to honor the authenticity of real escapees. He even visited the real locations where von Vera had been held. Veterans who saw the film later said it was unsettlingly accurate in showing the discipline of British guards and the cunning of their prisoner. The one that got away became a quiet success internationally, and even in Britain found respect among soldiers who recognized in von Wehr's struggle the universal hunger for freedom. Its ending was haunting, not triumphant. It suggested that even victory carried loneliness. Today it is studied as one of the few war films that dared to blur moral lines and remind viewers that captivity is not defined by nationality, but by circumstance. Number 6. The Great Raid, 2005. The Great Raid arrived quietly and with humility. It told a story so harrowing that many believed it was myth, but it happened. Set in the final months of World War II, it follows the real-life daring rescue of more than 500 American prisoners held by the Japanese in the Cabanatuan camp in the Philippines. The film showed not only the soldiers who stormed the camp, but also the frail survivors waiting behind bamboo fences for salvation they no longer believed would come. Unlike the patriotic war films of its time, The Great Raid did not glorify combat. It lingered on suffering, disease, starvation, and loss of faith. Benjamin Bratt and Joseph Fiennes carried the story with restrained performances, while director John Dahl focused on authenticity. Every set was built to scale based on wartime photographs. Surviving veterans advised the team, reminding them that the jungle was as much an enemy as the guards. Behind the camera, however, the film faced an uphill battle. Studio executives delayed release for nearly 2 years, fearing audiences would find it too bleak. Marketing departments wanted a rousing war adventure, but Dahl refused to polish it. He said it was a story about mercy, not victory. The final cut included scenes of silent prayer and haunted eyes that major studios tried to trim away. When the movie finally reached theaters, it failed commercially, but veterans embraced it. Survivors of Cabanatuan called it the most honest portrayal they had ever seen. They said it captured the mixture of dread and disbelief that came when rescue finally arrived. Today, The Great Raid endures as one of the most overlooked yet most faithful depictions of POW redemption, a film that showed freedom as something earned through exhaustion and grace. Number 5. Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, 1983. Few war films dared to explore the spiritual tension between prisoner and captor like Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. Directed by Nagisa Oshima and starring David Bowie and Japanese legend Ryuichi Sakamoto, it unfolded inside a Japanese POW camp during World War II. It was not about escape, it was about understanding. Bowie played Major Jack Selliers, a defiant British officer who becomes a fascination for the camp's conflicted commandant, Captain Yonoy. Their relationship became a battlefield of discipline, guilt, and suppressed emotion, while Lieutenant Lawrence, played by Tom Conti, mediated between cultures. The movie examined the invisible prisons of pride and faith, showing how captivity could turn enemies into mirrors of one another. When released, the film divided nations. Western critics admired its emotional depth, while Japanese audiences were shaken by its portrayal of cruelty within their wartime ranks. Oshima himself faced pressure from conservative groups who accused him of rewriting history. But his intent was not blame. It was reflection. He used silence more than violence and poetry more than propaganda. Behind the scenes, the production was turbulent. Bowie's ethereal performance came from real isolation. He refused comfort during filming and often stayed alone between takes. Sakamoto composed the haunting score while acting in the film, blending music and narrative into one aching tone. The theme song later became iconic, one of the most mournful pieces ever written about captivity. Survivors praised the film's honesty. About psychological warfare, they said it showed how the mind can be a prisoner long after the body is freed. Merry Christmas. Mr. Lawrence remains a masterpiece of empathy, proving that in the darkest places, understanding is the rarest form of rebellion. Number 4. The Railway Man, 2013. The Railway Man was not made for spectacle. It was made for memory. Based on the memoir of British officer Eric Lomax, it told the true story of a man who survived torture on the Burma Railway, then decades later faced the Japanese interpreter who tormented him. Colin Firth played Lomax with quiet restraint, while Hiroyuki Sanada portrayed his former captor Nagase in a story not of revenge but forgiveness. The film begins in the shadow of silence. Lomax is haunted by flashbacks of beatings and interrogation. When he discovers that Nagase is still alive, he travels to confront him. What follows is not vengeance, but reckoning, two men scarred by war, learning that forgiveness is the only true escape. Behind the scenes, director Jonathan Teplitsky insisted on emotional realism. He studied Lomax's actual diaries and worked closely with his widow Patricia to ensure accuracy. Many of the railway scenes were shot in the same humid jungles where Lomax once worked. Crew members described filming as spiritual penance. Actors broke down after takes, unable to shake the sorrow embedded in the story. Critics called it restrained but devastating. Survivors of the Burma Railway said it finally told their story with dignity and truth. The film became a bridge between generations, proving that reconciliation does not erase horror, it redefines it. Lomax himself saw early footage before his death. He wept and said it was the closest any film had come to capturing the loneliness of survival. The Railway Man endures as a quiet anthem of healing, showing that freedom sometimes begins only when hatred ends. Number 3. The Great Escape. 2. The Untold Story. 1988. The Great Escape 2 was more than a sequel. It was an act of correction. The original film had become legendary, but it was romanticized. This television miniseries sought to return to the harsh truth of what really happened after the escape. Starring Christopher Reeve, it retold the fate of the 50 Allied prisoners who were captured and executed by the Gestapo following the real 1944 breakout from Stalag Luft III. The film was not glamorous. It stripped away the adventure and focused on the aftermath, the hunt, the betrayal, and the moral scars left on those who survived. Reeve played Major Dodge, a fictionalized version of the officers who helped investigate war crimes after the war. The story moved between the claustrophobia of the tunnels and the chilling bureaucracy of Nazi retribution. Survivors of Stalag Luft III praised it for its brutal honesty. They said it finally showed the cost of rebellion. There was no motorcycle chase this time, only silence, interrogation, and loss. The movie captured the paranoia of waiting to be found, the weight of decisions that doomed friends, and the loneliness of living with survival guilt. Production faced endless skepticism. Studios doubted that audiences would tolerate a grim retelling of a beloved classic. Reeve, however, fought for authenticity. He met with historians and surviving pilots to shape his portrayal. Filmed in Europe near the real camp locations, it recreated the conditions so accurately that veterans who visited the set were reduced to tears. Critics were divided, some calling it too dark, but the veterans called it necessary. They said it was the version that finally told their truth. Its legacy endures quietly, overshadowed by its famous predecessor, but for survivors, it remains the definitive story of courage crushed and dignity reclaimed. Number 2. Unbroken, 2014. Unbroken turned the impossible life of Louis Zamperini into an epic of endurance. Directed by Angelina Jolie, it told the true story of the Olympic runner turned bomber crewman who crashed in the Pacific, drifted on a raft for 47 days, and was then captured by the Japanese. Tortured, starved, and humiliated, Zamperini refused to break. The title was not a slogan. It was fact. The film balanced grace with brutality. It showed the quiet defiance behind every beating and the faith that kept him alive. Jack O'Connell played Zamperini with fierce conviction, his sunburnt face and hollow eyes etched with exhaustion. Japanese actor Miyavi portrayed Watanabe, the sadistic guard nicknamed the Bird, whose cruelty mirrored the system itself. Behind the camera, the production was as demanding as the story. Jolie shot in searing Australian heat using authentic aircraft and real ocean sequences to capture isolation. Survivors of Japanese camps were invited as consultants, many breaking down on set when they saw the torture reenacted. Jolie insisted on accuracy over comfort, often filming long takes to let pain linger. Upon release, critics praised its visual beauty, but some accused it of softening the horrors of war. Veterans disagreed. They said it captured the essence, the endurance, the defiance, the faith that survival itself was victory. Zamperini himself lived to see the film's completion. When asked what he thought, he said simply, "They told the truth." Unbroken remains one of the most emotional POW films ever made, a modern monument to endurance against the darkness that men make for one another. Number 1. Papillon, 1973. Papillon was not a conventional war POW film, but for survivors of captivity, it became something deeper, a universal anthem of endurance. Based on the memoirs of Henri Charrière, it told the story of a man sentenced to the brutal French Guiana penal colonies, a place many veterans compared to the worst wartime camps. Steve McQueen played Papillon, the prisoner who refused to surrender his will, while Dustin Hoffman portrayed Degas, the fragile forger who found strength in unlikely friendship. The film captured the loneliness of captivity in ways few movies dared. Endless heat, disease, starvation, and psychological torture became the invisible bars. Survivors of wartime imprisonment said Papillon felt closer to their reality than most films about them. It showed the quiet defeats and the quiet rebellions that defined survival. Behind the scenes, authenticity came at a price. McQueen insisted on doing the solitary confinement scenes with minimal food and light, leading to real physical deterioration. Director Franklin J. Schaffner shot on remote, punishing locations where the cast battled insects, humidity, and illness. When Papillon released, critics admired it, but former prisoners embraced it. They said it captured the truth that escape is not always about fences or guards. Sometimes it is simply refusing to let the world break you. Behind every frame of these films lies a heartbeat once trapped behind wire and fear. These were not stories of war, they were stories of the will to live. Which of these escapes moved you the most? Tell us below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe because history's quietest heroes deserve to be heard once more.